My name is Quinn Morris. I'm 29. Last Tuesday at 9:47 a.m., I was standing in the employee break room at Serenity Springs Spa, holding a letter from the IRS that said I owed $84,000 in back taxes on income I never received, while Richard Sullivan, my stepmother, was in the parking lot outside, keying the word thief into the driver's side door of my 2011 Honda Civic. I know it was her because I could see her through the window. She was wearing the Burberry coat my father bought her for their anniversary. The same anniversary where she told him I'd stolen her credit card to buy myself a Louis Vuitton bag. I didn't own a Louis Vuitton bag. I owned 3 pairs of scrubs and a collection of essential oils that smelled like lavender and regret. The IRS letter shook in my hands. It said I'd filed a tax return claiming $290,000 in income from matured inheritance bonds. Bonds I didn't even know existed until that moment. The return had been filed electronically on February 3rd at 11:34 p.m., using my social security number, my birth date, and a bank account I'd never opened. The refund, $71,000, had been deposited and withdrawn within 48 hours. I'd been robbed, and the only person who had access to my personal documents was the woman currently carving profanity into my car. Quinn? My manager, Diane Chen, appeared in the doorway. She was 56, wore reading glasses on a beaded chain, and had never once raised her voice in the 8 months I'd worked there. "There's someone here demanding to speak with you. She says she's your mother." "Stepmother," I corrected automatically. "She's making a scene in the lobby." Before I go on, if stories about standing up for yourself mean something to you, please hit like and subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now and what time is it there. I folded the IRS letter into quarters and walked out to the lobby. Richard was standing next to the jade fountain, her arms crossed, her expression arranged into what I'd come to recognize as her wounded bird face. 3 clients were waiting for their appointments. All 3 were watching. "There she is," Richard announced. "The girl who thinks she's too good for her own family." My face burned. "Richard, I'm at work." "Oh, I know where you are, sweetheart. Rubbing strangers' feet for minimum wage while your father works himself to death trying to pay off the debts you left behind." I could feel Diane's eyes on me. I could feel the client's eyes on me. I could feel the heat crawling up my neck like a living thing. "I don't have any debts," I said quietly. "Really?" Richard's voice climbed higher. "Because the IRS sent a very interesting letter to our house this morning. Apparently my stepdaughter owes $84,000 in unpaid taxes." $84,000, Quinn. Where did that money go? What did you spend it on?" The oxygen left the room. "I didn't spend it on anything. I didn't even know—" "Don't lie to me." Richard took 3 steps closer. "She smelled like Chanel No. 5 and something chemical I couldn't place. You filed a fraudulent tax return using your great-aunt's inheritance bonds, bonds that were supposed to go into a family trust. You cashed them out, took the refund, and now the IRS wants their money back." "That's not true." "Your signature is on the return, Quinn." "I never signed anything." Richard turned to Diane. "I'm sorry you have to see this. Quinn has always had a problem with honesty, ever since she was a child. Her father and I have tried therapy, we've tried boundaries, but she just keeps—" "Stop," I said. Richard's eyes widened. "Excuse me?" I said stop. My hands were shaking. My stomach was in my shoes, but something hard and small had lodged itself behind my sternum, and I couldn't swallow it back down. "I don't know what you're talking about. I never filed a tax return for $290,000. I never touched any inheritance bonds. And if the IRS sent a letter to your house, that means someone used my information without my permission." Richard laughed. It was a bright, tinkling sound. "Oh, Quinn, always the victim." "I'm not a victim. I'm telling you the truth." "The truth?" Richard's voice dropped. It became soft, almost gentle. "The truth is that you've resented me since the day I married your father. The truth is that you've been jealous of everything I've built with him. And now you're trying to destroy our financial stability because you can't stand to see us happy." I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. Richard smiled. That's what I thought. She turned on her heel and walked out. The glass door swung shut behind her with a soft hiss. The three clients looked away. Diane touched my shoulder briefly, then retreated to her office without a word. I stood there for 4 minutes and 37 seconds. I know because I watched the clock on the wall. The second hand made tiny clicking sounds. My hands stopped shaking. My stomach climbed back up to where it belonged. And the hard, small thing behind my sternum grew roots. Let me take you back 11 years to the summer I turned 18. My great-aunt Josephine was 81 years old, and she lived in a powder blue Victorian on Sycamore Street, with a porch that wrapped around 3 sides, and wisteria that bloomed purple in May. She smelled like lavender sachets and Earl Grey tea. She wore pearls every day, even to water her tomatoes. I spent that summer helping her reorganize her attic. We found photo albums, hat boxes, my grandfather's medals from Korea. On the last day before I left for community college, she took me to lunch at a tea room called the Painted Daisy. They served cucumber sandwiches on tiered trays and poured Darjeeling into china cups so thin you could see light through them. Quinn, she said, setting down her teacup with a soft clink, I need you to listen carefully. I was 18. I nodded. Your father is a good man, but he's lonely. Lonely men make foolish choices. She folded her hands in her lap. They were spotted with age, the knuckles swollen with arthritis. When I'm gone, there will be people who try to take what's yours, people who smile to your face and lie behind your back. Aunt Josephine, hush, I'm not finished, she smiled. I've set aside something for you, bonds that mature on your 28th birthday. They're in your name, and no one can touch them. But Quinn, her eyes locked onto mine, promise me you'll be careful. Promise me you'll pay attention to who has access to your documents, your social security card, your birth certificate, your mail. I promise, I said. Good girl. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Her palm was warm and papery. Remember, people who love you don't need to steal from you. And people who steal from you never loved you at all. I thought about that promise a lot over the next decade. I thought about it when my father married Richard 6 months after Aunt Josephine's funeral. I thought about it when Richard moved into our house and started asking questions about family finances. I thought about it when mail started disappearing from our mailbox. But I was 19, then 20, then 25, and life kept happening. I finished my massage therapy certification. I moved into a studio apartment on the east side of town. I worked at 3 different spas, learning Swedish technique and hot stone therapy, and how to smile when clients complained about the music volume. I lost touch with my father. He called less. I called less. Richard was always there in the background, her voice bright and cheerful, asking if I needed anything, offering help I never accepted. Aunt Josephine died when I was 18. I didn't know about the bonds. I didn't know they'd matured on my 28th birthday. I didn't know Richard had been watching my mail, waiting. The first real betrayal came 3 weeks after the IRS letter. I was closing the spa at 8:30 p.m. on a Thursday. Diane had already gone home. I was wiping down the massage tables in room 3 when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Quinn Morris? A man's voice, professional and clipped. Yes? This is Agent David Ortega with the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. I'm calling about a tax fraud case filed under your Social Security number. Do you have a few minutes to speak? The massage oil bottle slipped from my hands. It didn't break. It just rolled across the floor in a lazy arc and stopped against the baseboard. Yes, I can talk. Agent Ortega explained that someone had filed an electronic tax return in my name on February 3rd. The return claimed $290,000 in bond income and requested a refund of $71,000 based on fabricated withholding. The refund had been deposited into an account at First National Bank under my name, then immediately transferred to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. Miss Morris, did you file this return? No. Did you authorize anyone to file on your behalf? No. Do you have any knowledge of inheritance bonds valued at $290,000? My throat was so dry I could barely form words. My great aunt might have left me something, but I never received anything. I didn't know about any bonds. I see. There was a pause. I could hear him typing. Ms. Morris, you're currently under investigation for tax fraud. I need you to come to our office on Monday at 10 a.m. to provide documentation proving your identity and employment history. If you fail to appear, a warrant may be issued. He gave me an address on Federal Plaza. I wrote it on the back of an appointment card with a pen that was running out of ink. My handwriting looked like it belonged to someone else. I sat on the floor of that massage room for 20 minutes after he hung up. The lavender diffuser kept running. The sound machine played recorded ocean waves. My phone buzzed twice with texts I didn't read. When I finally stood up, my knees cracked. I was 29 years old and I felt 90. I drove home in silence. My apartment was a 450-square-foot studio above a Korean barbecue restaurant. It smelled like sesame oil and grilled beef 24 hours a day. I loved it. It was mine. I paid $875 a month, and every payment came from my own bank account, earned with my own hands. I made chamomile tea I didn't drink. I sat on my futon and stared at the wall. At 11:47 p.m., my father called. Quinn, we need to talk. His voice was tired. He sounded older than 61. He sounded like a man who'd been talked to by his wife for several hours and had finally given in. Dad, Richard told me what happened. She told me about the IRS letter, about the bonds, about the tax fraud. I didn't do it. Silence. Dad, I swear I didn't file that return. Someone stole my identity. Someone used my social security number and… Quinn. His voice was so gentle it made my chest ache. Richard showed me the return. It has your electronic signature. It was filed from an IP address that traces back to your apartment building. The room tilted. That's impossible. Is it? Now his voice had an edge. You've been struggling financially for years. You work at a spa making, what, $32,000 a year? You never went to college. You never tried to build a real career. And now suddenly there's $290,000 in bonds that Aunt Josephine left you, and you're claiming you didn't know about them? I didn't. Richard says you've been asking about the estate for months. She says you called the executor in January asking about Aunt Josephine's will. I never called anyone. She has phone records, Quinn. My hands started shaking again. Dad, please, you have to believe me. I would never. I want to believe you, he said, and I could hear it in his voice. He didn't. But the evidence is pretty clear. And Richard, she's devastated. She thought you two were finally building a relationship. She's been trying so hard to be a good stepmother to you. And this is how you repay her? Something inside me cracked. Not broke, just cracked, like ice on a pond in early spring. A good stepmother, I repeated. Yes. Dad, she keyed my car. What? Last week, she came to my workplace, accused me of theft in front of clients and my boss, then went outside and scratched the word thief into my car door. Silence. Then, Quinn, that's a serious accusation. I watched her do it. Did you report it to the police? No, Then how do I know it actually happened? The crack widened. Because I'm your daughter, I said, and I'm telling you the truth. More silence. Longer this time. I could hear Richard's voice in the background, high and worried, asking if everything was okay. I think you need professional help, my father said finally. Richard has the name of a therapist who specializes in compulsive lying and… I hung up. I sat there on my futon with my phone in my hand, and I understood for the first time what Aunt Josephine had meant. People who love you don't need to steal from you, and people who steal from you never loved you at all. The next morning, I went to the IRS office. Agent Ortega was 40-something with gray at his temples and reading glasses that slid down his nose. He reviewed my documents: driver's license, birth certificate, social security card, employment records from Serenity Springs Spa. "Ms. Morris, I need you to understand the severity of this situation," he said. "If we determine you filed this return knowingly, you're looking at up to 5 years in federal prison and $250,000 in fines." "I understand." "Do you have any idea who might have had access to your personal information?" I thought about Richard going through my father's filing cabinet. I thought about mail disappearing from my childhood home before I moved out. I thought about the way she'd smiled at Aunt Josephine's funeral and asked about the will. "My stepmother," I said. Agent Ortega wrote something down. "Does she have your social security number?" "My father probably has it in his files. They're married. She would have access." "Does she have a motive?" I almost laughed. "She married my father 8 months after my great-aunt died. My great-aunt was wealthy. My father isn't. You tell me." Agent Ortega looked at me over his glasses. "That's circumstantial." "So is the IP address that supposedly traces back to my apartment." He smiled slightly. "Fair point. We'll investigate. In the meantime, don't leave the state and keep your phone on." I worked. That's what I did. I showed up at Serenity Springs Spa at 7:45 a.m. every day, and I worked. I gave deep tissue massages to software engineers with neck pain. I gave prenatal massages to women in their third trimester who couldn't sleep. I gave hot stone treatments to retirees who wanted 90 minutes of silence and eucalyptus-scented air. Diane never asked about Richard's scene in the lobby. But she started scheduling me for the private rooms in the back, away from the main entrance. She started giving me the clients who tipped well. Small mercies. One of those clients was Margaret Huang. She was 68, a retired architect, and she came in every Tuesday at 2 p.m. for a 60-minute Swedish massage. She never talked during the session, but afterward, she always sat in the relaxation room for 20 minutes, drinking herbal tea. On the third Tuesday in April, she asked me to sit with her. "Quinn, may I ask you something personal?" I was exhausted. I'd worked 9 clients that day. My hands ached. "Of course. Are you in some kind of trouble?" I must have looked startled because she held up a hand. "I'm not trying to pry, but I've been coming here for 6 months and you've always been professional and kind. Lately you look like you're carrying the weight of the world, and last week I saw a woman screaming at you in the parking lot." Richard. She'd come back. She'd cornered me by my car after my shift and accused me of turning my father against her. I'd stood there with my keys in my hand, silent, while she cried performative tears and said I was destroying her marriage. "I'm handling it," I said. Margaret studied me. "My late husband used to say that handling it usually means suffering in silence." I didn't respond. She sipped her tea. "I knew your great-aunt Josephine." The world stopped. "You... what?" "Josephine Chen. We were in the same garden club for 15 years. She talked about you constantly, showed me pictures. She was very proud of you." Margaret set down her teacup. "She was also very worried about you. Specifically, she was worried about what would happen after she died." My heart was pounding. "What do you mean?" "She knew your father would remarry. She knew whoever he married would likely try to access the family assets. So she made preparations." Margaret reached into her purse and pulled out a small cream-colored envelope. "She asked me to hold on to this. She said if you ever looked like you were drowning, I should give it to you." The envelope had my name on it in Aunt Josephine's handwriting. Fountain pen. Blue ink. Perfect copperplate script. "I don't understand," I said. "You don't have to. Just read it. And Quinn..." Margaret stood up, collecting her cardigan and water bottle. Your aunt loved you very much. Whatever's in that envelope, she did it to protect you. Trust that. She left. I sat there in the relaxation room with the envelope in my hands. The spa was empty. Diane had gone home. The sound machines were still playing recorded rainfall. I opened the envelope. Inside was a single piece of stationery, folded in thirds, and a small brass key. The letter said, "My dearest Quinn, if Margaret is giving you this letter, then I'm gone, and Richard Sullivan is already doing exactly what I knew she would do. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I'm sorry I couldn't stop this while I was alive. I tried to warn your father, but love makes people blind, and loneliness makes them stupid. Do you remember our lunch at the Painted Daisy? I told you I'd set aside bonds for you. They matured on your 28th birthday, $290,000 total. I put them in an irrevocable trust with strict instructions. Only you could access them, and only with proper identification and a password only you would know. But I also knew Richard would try to steal them, so I created a decoy. The bonds she found and cashed? Those were fake. Real-looking, but worthless. The paperwork she forged? It will prove she committed identity theft and tax fraud. The real bonds are in a safety deposit box at Cascade Credit Union, branch number 8 on Hawthorne Street. Box 447. This key will open it. The password is Painted Daisy. Inside the box, original bond certificates in your name, copies of all trust documents with my attorney, Franklin Ross, 1400 Northwest 23rd Avenue. Security footage I had installed showing Richard going through your father's files. Timestamp November 18th, 2:34 a.m. Recorded conversations where she discussed getting rid of your debt by accessing that inheritance. A separate cashier's check for $75,000 for legal fees. Don't go to the police yet. Wait. Richard will escalate. She always does. She'll push until she backs herself into a corner, and then she'll destroy herself. All you have to do is be patient and let the evidence speak. You are not a thief, Quinn. You are not a liar. You are my girl, my bright and gentle girl, and I am so sorry I won't be there to see you stand up and take back what's yours. All my love, your Aunt Jo. P.S. Remember, people who love you don't need to steal from you. I read it 3 times. My hands were shaking so badly the paper rattled. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I just sat there in that quiet room with the sound of fake rain and the weight of my aunt's foresight pressing down on my chest like a stone. She'd known. For years, she'd known. And she'd prepared. I drove to Cascade Credit Union the next morning at 7:58 a.m., 2 minutes before they opened. Branch number 8 was a squat brick building with a parking lot that needed repaving. I waited in my car, watching the employees unlock the doors, and when the clock on my dashboard read 8 o'clock, I went inside. The safety deposit box was in the vault. It took 3 forms of ID and the password, Painted Daisy, before the bank officer led me to a small private room and left me alone with the box. Inside, everything Aunt Josephine had promised. The bond certificates were pristine, sealed in plastic sleeves. My name, my social security number. Maturity date, my 28th birthday. Value, $290,000. There was a notarized letter from the trust administrator confirming that no withdrawals had been made, no transfers authorized. The security footage was on a USB drive. I watched it on my phone. The timestamp read November 18th, 2:34 a.m. The location was my father's home office. Richard was there, alone, going through the filing cabinet. She pulled out my birth certificate, my social security card. She photographed both with her phone. She put them back. She left. The recorded conversations were worse. Audio files, dated and labeled. Richard talking to someone on the phone, her sister maybe, or a friend, discussing the inheritance situation and how Quinn doesn't even know the bonds exist. So if we move fast, we can claim them before she figures it out. There was more. Tax forms, bank statements showing the fake refund deposits, transaction records tracing the money to the Cayman account, and the cashier's check for $75,000 made out to me with a note. For legal fees, you'll need them. I sat in that little room for 40 minutes. I didn't cry. I didn't feel victorious. I just felt tired and sad and unbelievably grateful that someone had loved me enough to plan for this. I called Franklin Ross from the parking lot. His secretary scheduled me for that afternoon at 3 p.m. Franklin Ross was 70-something, white-haired, with a corner office that overlooked the river. He stood when I walked in, shook my hand and said, "Your aunt told me I'd be hearing from you eventually. I'm sorry it took this long." We talked for 2 hours. He reviewed every document in the safety deposit box. He explained that Aunt Josephine had come to him 6 months before she died and set up an elaborate trap. Decoy bonds with real-looking certificates but no actual value, a trust that required biometric verification and a password only I knew, and a surveillance system she'd installed in my father's house without his knowledge. She was a very thorough woman, Franklin said, and she was very clear about her instructions. We wait until Richard makes a public move. We wait until she accuses you in front of witnesses. And then we present the evidence in a setting where she can't run, can't deny, and can't manipulate your father. When? I asked. Soon. Richard filed for a home equity loan last week. The closing is scheduled for May 15th at 10 a.m. at First National Bank. Your father will be there. The loan officer will be there. The notary will be there. Franklin smiled grimly. That's when we'll make our move. May 15th was 3 weeks away. I worked, I ate, I slept poorly. I ignored my father's calls. I ignored Richard's texts, which alternated between saccharine, "I'm worried about you, sweetheart," and accusatory, "Your father deserves better than this." On May 12th, Richard came to the spa again. It was 4 p.m., the quiet hour between the lunch rush and evening appointments. I was restocking the supply closet when Diane appeared in the doorway. "She's back," Diane said quietly. I knew who she meant. Richard was in the lobby. She'd brought reinforcements this time. My father and 2 people I didn't recognize but who looked official and uncomfortable. "Quinn!" Richard's voice was bright, devastated, theatrical. "Thank God, we've been so worried." I walked out slowly. My hands were steady. My breathing was even. Something had shifted in me over the past 3 weeks. The hard, small thing behind my sternum had grown. It had weight now. Substance. "What do you want, Richard?" She pressed a hand to her chest, wounded bird face fully deployed. "That's what you have to say to your father? After everything we've done for you?" My father looked exhausted. He'd lost weight. His shirt collar was too big. "Quinn, please, we need to talk about this tax situation. Richard found a lawyer who thinks he can help, but we need you to sign a settlement agreement," one of the official-looking people said. He was 50-something, wearing a suit that cost more than my monthly rent. "I'm Robert Vance, Ms. Sullivan's attorney. We're prepared to offer you a very generous deal. You sign over the inheritance bonds to your father and stepmother, and in exchange, we'll negotiate with the IRS on your behalf and potentially avoid jail time." The room was very quiet. I could hear the jade fountain. I could hear someone's phone buzzing in the distance. "No," I said. Richard's face changed. The wounded bird vanished. What replaced it was cold and sharp. "Excuse me?" I said no. "Quinn, you don't have a choice here," Robert Vance said. "You're facing federal charges. Tax fraud is a felony. If you go to trial, you'll lose everything. Your freedom, your career, your future. This settlement is your only option." "I didn't commit fraud," I said. "Your signature is on the return," Richard snapped. "Your bank account received the refund. The IP address traces to your apartment. What more evidence do you need?" I looked at my father. He wasn't meeting my eyes. "Dad," I said, "do you really think I would steal from Aunt Josephine? Do you really think I would commit a federal crime for $71,000? He opened his mouth. Richard cut him off. "This isn't about what he thinks, Quinn. This is about what's legally provable." And right now, all the evidence points to you. Unless you sign this settlement, you're going to prison. Is that what you want? Is that what Josephine would have wanted for you? Don't use her name, I thought. You didn't know her. You didn't love her. You're not allowed to say her name. But I didn't say it out loud. Instead, I said, I'm not signing anything, and if you'll excuse me, I have clients waiting. I turned around and walked back to the supply closet. My hands didn't shake. My voice didn't break. I just walked away. Behind me, I heard Richard say, "She's going to regret this." On May 15th at 9:47 a.m., I walked into First National Bank wearing the only professional outfit I owned: black slacks, white blouse, navy blazer from Target. Franklin Ross met me in the lobby. He was carrying a leather briefcase that looked older than I was. "You ready?" he asked. I nodded. The loan closing was in a conference room on the second floor, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the street, long oak table. 17 people already seated: the loan officer, the notary, 2 bank executives, my father, Richard, Robert Vance, and various assistants and witnesses I didn't recognize. Richard saw me first. Her eyes went wide, then narrowed. "What is she doing here, Ms. Morris has a legal interest in this proceeding," Franklin said calmly. "She has a right to be present." "She has no interest in our home equity loan," Robert Vance said. "Actually, she does." Franklin set his briefcase on the table and opened it. "Because the loan you're attempting to secure is based on fraudulent assets. Specifically, inheritance bonds that were stolen from Ms. Morris using identity theft and tax fraud." The room went silent. My father's face drained of color. "What?" Franklin pulled out the first document. On February 3rd of this year, someone filed a tax return in Quinn Morris's name, claiming $290,000 in bond income. The return was fraudulent. The bonds in question were decoys created by Josephine Chen specifically to identify the person attempting to steal from her great-niece. He placed the document on the table. Security footage stills. Timestamp, November 18th, 2:34 a.m. Richard in my father's office photographing my documents. This footage was recorded by a security system Ms. Chen installed 6 months before her death. It shows Richard Sullivan accessing Quinn's personal documents without authorization. Next document, audio transcripts. Richard's voice discussing the inheritance situation and moving fast before Quinn figures it out. Richard's face had gone from pale to gray. That's illegal surveillance. It's not admissible." "It's admissible in civil court," Franklin said. "And it's admissible in federal fraud investigations. Speaking of which," he placed another document on the table. "Agent David Ortega of the IRS Criminal Investigation Division has completed his investigation. The IP address that filed the fraudulent return? It traces to a laptop registered to Richard Sullivan. The bank account that received the refund? Opened by Richard Sullivan using Quinn's social security number and a forged signature. The offshore account in the Cayman Islands? Also registered to Richard Sullivan." The loan officer stood up. "I'm sorry, but we can't proceed with this closing until—" "There's more," Franklin said. He wasn't done. He pulled out the real bond certificates. "These are the actual inheritance bonds left to Quinn Morris by Josephine Chen. They've been in a secured safety deposit box for the past 11 years. They matured on Quinn's 28th birthday. Total value, $290,000. Ms. Morris is the sole beneficiary. No withdrawals have been made. No transfers authorized." My father was staring at Richard. "You told me Quinn cashed them out. You showed me the tax return." Richard's voice cracked. "She was going to waste them. She was going to throw that money away on spa school or some ridiculous—" "You stole from her," my father said. His voice was very quiet. "I was protecting us. She doesn't deserve that money. She's done nothing with her life. She's a massage therapist, for God's sake." You needed," Franklin interrupted, "to fund a lifestyle you couldn't afford. According to these financial records." Another document. You've spent $340,000 in the past 3 years on luxury goods, travel, and personal expenses. Your husband's income is $78,000 annually. Where did the rest come from, Ms. Sullivan? Richard didn't answer. She was looking at the door, calculating. I could see it in her eyes. You're not going anywhere, Agent Ortega said from the doorway. I hadn't noticed him arrive. He was wearing the same reading glasses. He looked tired. Richard Sullivan, you're under arrest for identity theft, tax fraud, and wire fraud. You have the right to remain silent. I didn't hear the rest. I was watching my father. He was sitting very still, his hands flat on the table, staring at the documents like they were written in a language he didn't speak. Richard was crying now, real tears finally. I did this for us. I did this so we could have a life together. She doesn't need that money. She's young. She'll be fine. But we're getting older, and we deserve— You deserve nothing, my father said. It was the first time I'd heard him speak to her that way. Flat, final, done. Agent Ortega led Richard out in handcuffs. She was still talking, still explaining, still trying to make it make sense. The conference room emptied slowly. The loan officer, the notary, the executives. One by one, they filed out, murmuring apologies, looking anywhere but at me or my father. Finally, it was just the three of us. Me, my father, and Franklin Ross. Quinn, my father said, I'm so sorry. I looked at him. He looked old, older than 61, older than any man should look. I didn't know, he said. I swear I didn't know she was— I thought you'd— His voice broke. I chose her over you. I believed her instead of you, and I'm sorry. I wanted to say it was okay. I wanted to say I forgave him, but I couldn't. Not yet. I need time, I said. He nodded. I understand. Franklin Ross cleared his throat. Mr. Morris, you should know that your wife faces up to 15 years in federal prison and $500,000 in fines. She'll likely lose her assets in asset forfeiture proceedings. Your home may be affected if it's found to be purchased with fraudulent funds. My father looked at me. What do you want me to do? It was the first time he'd asked me that in years. I want you to tell the truth, I said, to the investigators, to the court, to yourself. That's all. I left him there. Franklin walked me to my car. Your aunt would be proud of you, he said. I thought about Aunt Josephine in her powder blue Victorian, drinking Earl Grey and planning for a future she wouldn't live to see. I thought about her handwriting on that envelope. All my love. Thank you, I said. 3 months later, Richard pleaded guilty to federal fraud charges. She was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison and ordered to pay $290,000 in restitution plus fines. My father filed for divorce. He sold the house and moved into a 1-bedroom apartment near the river. We talk now. Not often. Once a month, maybe. Coffee on neutral ground. He's started therapy. He says he's trying to understand how he let things get so bad. I don't know if I'll ever fully forgive him, but I'm learning that forgiveness isn't the same as reconciliation. You can forgive someone and still keep your distance. I'm still a spa therapist. I still work at Serenity Springs. I still give Swedish massages to software engineers and hot stone treatments to retirees. But now I also own a small house on Maple Street with a porch and a garden. I planted wisteria last spring. It should bloom purple next May. I put $100,000 of the inheritance into a trust for my future children if I have them. I put $50,000 into retirement accounts. I put $25,000 into a scholarship fund for massage therapy students. The rest is in savings, untouched, just existing. Proof that someone loved me enough to prepare for the worst. I visit Aunt Josephine's grave every month. I bring Earl Grey tea in a thermos and cucumber sandwiches wrapped in wax paper. I sit on the grass and tell her about my life. The clients who made me laugh. The garden that's finally taking root. The fact that I'm learning to trust people again. Slowly, carefully. If you're watching this and you've ever had to choose between staying silent to keep the peace and speaking up to keep your dignity, I want you to know something. Silence isn't peace. Silence is the price you pay for someone else's comfort. And you don't owe anyone comfort at the cost of your truth. If you've walked away from someone who made you feel small, type "I walked away" in the comments. Or if you stayed and fought for your boundaries and your worth, type "I stayed and fought." Both are brave. Both are valid. Both deserve recognition. If this story meant something to you, check the description for more stories just like this one. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. 6 months after the trial, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single pressed wisteria bloom and a note in handwriting I didn't recognize. Your aunt asked me to send this when the time was right. She saved it from her garden the summer you turned 18. She said you'd understand what it meant. I did understand. I pressed it between the pages of a book and put it on my shelf, next to a photograph of Aunt Josephine and me at the Painted Daisy. Both of us smiling, both of us holding teacups, both of us knowing that love, real love, doesn't need to steal, it just needs to prepare. And sometimes preparation is the most powerful form of protection there is.